Okay, um, many of you have heard the basics here, and I won't dwell on them, but I will tell you some about some more recent results that we have. But here's a quick look at the background of this. Let me get my advance button working here. There we go. So when I first came, a few months in, I asked the facilities director for a bill, and this is the bill he gave me. This was September 2019, and you can see the total was $21,767. There was a generation charge, which was 16,000 of that, but there were a bunch of other charges, and the biggest one was this one called capacity charge, which at the time was $4,400. Okay, then later on, that grew, and now it is at 12,700 per month, so about 160,000 a year of capacity charges. Well, I had no idea what a capacity charge was, but I started trying to find out, and so it turns out that our local grid operator called PJM Interconnection charges us for and charges every commercial account, not homeowners, but every commercial account, according to how much they use on peak days for the grid. These dots, each of them represent an hour of electricity on our grid, our region of the grid, and you can see some days are very high, and some are much lower. Weekends are lower, and the lowest of all is 4th of July nights down here at the bottom. So these dots just represent all the hours this summer on the grid, and you can see there's a handful of really high ones. Those are the ones that PJM has to worry about because they require the use of very expensive and polluting generation equipment. Okay, so faced with this, and only the top 5 peaks count. Our capacity charge is based entirely on the 5 top hours of the 5 peak days of the summer. That determines our capacity charge for every month of the ensuing year. So the charges we're paying now are from last summer's peaks. Okay, so we decided to see if we could lower our usage during some of those peaks. And so we did a Zoom presentation. We figured out how to use the PJM website to look at their forecasts of peaks, and we had a strategy for picking out which of those were likely to be which of the forecasted peaks for the coming week, because that's as far as PJM would forecast, which of them was likely to be one of the summer peaks that concerned us. And when we saw one coming that looked like it could be a peak, we called for a peak alert day. And on those days, what we did was we asked residents to pre-cool their cottages or their residence before 4, and then during the 4 to 6 hour, not to turn on their air conditioning, to turn it off, and to not use their appliances and their hot water in an effort to save electricity during that 4 to 6 hour. We chose 4 to 6 because the peaks in the past have either been during the 4 o'clock hour or the 4 o'clock hour or the 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock hour. And so we knew those were the right ones to focus on. So we had a variety of ways of getting people signed up for the mailing list and alerting them on the day. So over the course of the summer, here's those same dots again that you saw before, representing the summer's worth of electricity. Over the course of the summer, we picked out 13 days that we thought were possible peaks and asked people to do this on those 13 days. And you can see the arrows, they represent the days when we thought this could be a summer peak. And it turned out that among the 13, there were the 5 that ended up being the summer peaks, and those are the red arrows in the diagram here. So again, each of these dots is an hour. Only 5 of those dots count in terms of our charge, and those are indicated by the red arrows. So how did we do? This is the energy profile, the electricity profile for Longwood on an averaged over the 13 peak alert days. And what you see in the shaded area is the usage during the 4 to 6 period. And you can see that we were successful in dramatically reducing the amount of electricity during the 4 to 6 period. Similarly, the effort at Crosslands, which was doing this in parallel with us, also resulted in reduced electrical usage. So we know that we did well on the 13 days, but how did we do on the 5 peaks? And I'm going to give you a chart here, which is a little dense, a little hard to follow, but let me explain it. So this is about 10,000 15-minute usage reports of how much electricity was used on the Longwood campus. And each of these dots represents one 15-minute slice. And the temperature during that 15 minutes is indicated across the horizontal axis, and the amount of electricity used is indicated on the vertical axis. So you can see, yes, as the temperature goes up, so does the usage. But you can also see these orange dots here, and those represent the 15-minute periods that fell within those 5 critical hours. And you can see that they are on the whole a little bit lower than most of the corresponding dots in this diagram. What that shows is that compared with the typical usage, that our usage was a little less during those hours. The fact that they're all up here at this corner of the diagram simply reflects that those were high temperature days. That's what causes the peaks. So of course they're up here, but they are also lower than other dots that correspond, that have the same temperature on the whole. So it was a useful exercise. It's possible to extract the data and get an estimate of what we did save, and it turns out and I think there's some refinement to be done here, but at least for the Longwood campus, it looks like it might have been around 8% of the total electricity during those 15-minute periods that we saved. And if that 8% is right, and if it is also true for the Crosslands campus, and if the capacity charge next year is the same as the capacity charge this year, if all those ifs are true, then we probably save between $10,000 and $15,000 on our electrical bill. We'll get a better idea of that once we see what our new capacity charge is in the coming year. There's some refinement to be done with the calculations, but basically that's the idea. So could somebody else do this? Sure, they could. You would have to see what grid region you're in. The little map at the side shows you what the regions are. Do you have central metering? We heard from Steve earlier that at Collington they don't have central metering, so this may not apply at Collington, for example, because every resident has their own meter, and this sort of stuff doesn't usually apply to homeowners. You have to work out how to promote it, and you'll need a good relationship with your facilities department to get the data that you need. So I think that's basically it from me today.
Are there any questions for George on this presentation? Steve?
So you are on a level rate with a capacity charge for all the residential, or for the whole site, basically.
Good point. Yes.
Because we have time of day metering, time of day billing. So at Collington, for the common areas and the Creighton Center, the medical area, all of those are on, there's a much higher charge for the peak hours. And on all the residential bills, it's a level rate, but there is a capacity charge. So we could do exactly what you're talking about on the residential bills.
Great. Yeah, that's a very good point. We don't have time of use billing here. We may at some point. It doesn't look like we will anytime soon. So that we pay the same basic rate regardless of the time of day, but we pay the capacity charge. And there's also a distribution charge that varies in the same sort of way at a lower level.
I was saying my sister-in-law is at Carol Woods in Chapel Hill, retired CCRC, and they are on, everybody apparently is on a time of day billing. So they have a program to just shift your load out of the peak, your laundry and whatever, out of the peak hours, but it's not based on like the peak hours that PJM uses.
Yeah.
But so each model, there is a way to reduce your billing if you can shift the load. It's just different approaches as based on the billing.
That's a very good point.
I also mentioned, and depending on how your site is set up, if you've got individual billing, our big issue with getting the data from the finance department here is confidentiality. If they're going to let residents look at individual bills, we got to have an arrangement where we're committed to confidentiality, and once the data is in the spreadsheet, it's coded and anonymized so that we don't know that, oh, Joe Smith is really must be keeping his cottage at 80 degrees and leaving the windows open.
I remembered the second item I was going to mention. Having run the program at Crosswinds, we had over 100 households that responded to our initial request for emails, and building that community of people interested was reassuring and encouraging. So that we used it both to reduce energy, to avoid the nasty, ugly emissions of the worst generating capacity, but we also built a community here through that process.
Yeah, that was an important point here at Longwood as well.